I'm Eddie Muller, welcoming you to an international installment of Noir Alley. Greed has sealed the fate of many a noir protagonist, but today's offering proves, sadly, that sometimes compassion can be just as dangerous. That's the hook in High and Low, released by Japan's Toho Studios in 1963. The film explores the aftermath of an act of compassion, using a clever mix of cinematic styles. One moment we're trapped inside a claustrophobic hostage thriller, the next we're hunting down clues in a breathless police procedural. There's even some grim social drama mixed in during a visit to Yokohama's Dope Alley, which makes Noir Alley seem family-friendly in comparison. For its makers and its viewers, this is a serious undertaking and an epic by Noir Alley standards. With a running time of 2 hours and 23 minutes, it's the longest film I've shown in the 8 years I've been hosting this show. It is worth the investment, though, because High and Low is one of the best films ever made by one of the greatest directors in film history, Akira Kurosawa. Kurosawa was no stranger to film noir. He came to international prominence for his samurai epics in the 1950s, but his reputation in Japan was established with contemporary 40s thrillers like Drunken Angel and Stray Dog. Both of those have earned my seal of approval during Noir or Not segments, and they also showcase Kurosawa's talent for nimble, morally complex storytelling. High and Low was a case of the director returning to the scene of the crime, so to speak, using the 1959 Ed McBain novel King's Ransom as a roadmap, or at least as a starting point. Kurosawa liked the premise of the story in which a wealthy shoe manufacturer gets pulled into a ransom plot. It had already been made in this country as an episode of the NBC drama 87th Precinct, with McBain himself doing the teleplay. FYI, there was no Ed McBain. It was the pseudonym of novelist Evan Hunter, which was already an alias. His real name was Salvatore Albert Lombino. But while Kurosawa loved the predicament at the core of King's Ransom, he wasn't satisfied with the novel's ending. He'd experienced a similar situation years before, when the child of a close friend was kidnapped, and he felt the aftermath of the novel's central crime demanded deeper exploration. So he worked with a team of writers to retool the script, using a process known as straight-to-final draft. Kurosawa's M.O. was to have writers work on the same scenes separately, then he'd stitch together the pieces he liked best. Working this way, the screenplay was knocked out incredibly fast, while adding significant and powerful changes to the film's second half. Kurosawa specifically altered the novel to enhance two of his biggest obsessions: the class divide in post-war Japan and the conflicting values held by his main characters. The director's ambition was to make something profound from what was a slender police procedural, as indicated by the film's actual Japanese title, Heaven and Hell. Of course, any discussion of High and Low would be incomplete without mentioning its leading man, Toshiro Mifune. He'd been one of Kurosawa's most reliable allies over the years, portraying everything from samurais and painters to elderly factory owners. High and Low marked their 15th and penultimate collaboration, a truly astonishing body of work. And Mifune's performance as Gondo, the unraveling shoe king, is as good as any of them. He's a self-made man desperately having to rely on others and hating every second of it, displayed by his constant sweating, manic pacing, and panic outbursts as he's forced to weigh the value of a single human life. As a theme, this is about as noir as it gets. Co-starring an array of Kurosawa regulars like Takeshi Kato, Tatsuya Nakadai, and Takashi Shimura, and featuring a star-making performance by Tsutomu Yamazaki as the unstable mastermind behind The King's Ransom, here is one of Akira Kurosawa's masterpieces, High and Low. 6 decades later, and that ending still packs a hell of a punch. The directing, acting, and score, which leave space for those echoing screams, create a movie experience that's liable to resurface in a nightmare. Its power is so overwhelming, it convinced Akira Kurosawa to scrap the ending he'd originally planned. Gondo was supposed to meet with Inspector Tokura following his prison visit and reflect on everything that had transpired. It was meant to be a kind of decompression before the final credits, like what Alfred Hitchcock did with the psychiatrist at the end of Psycho. Kurosawa spent 2 weeks filming that final conversation, but was so taken with Tsutomu Yamazaki's performance, he decided to send viewers home on this more somber and very noir note. Yamazaki had already been named Newcomer of the Year at the Elan d'Or Awards, the Japanese equivalent of the Oscars, but he wasn't sure he could convincingly portray High and Low's disturbed antagonist. He was nervous to the point of nausea during his audition, but Kurosawa sensed a kinship with the actor and worked at bolstering his confidence. The result was the mesmerizing performance you just witnessed. The duo collaborated twice more, and Yamazaki would go on to become a big star in Japan. He's still working as he approaches 90 years of age. As a director, Kurosawa was flexible enough to improvise in the editing room, but for High and Low, he followed a very specific game plan during production. He structured the film on paper as 2 distinct halves and took great pains to make them distinct from each other on screen. The early scenes, comprising the high half, were largely confined to sound stages and filmed in long, uninterrupted takes. Some of those shots last 10 minutes, and they would have run even longer had the camera technology been more advanced in the 1960s. The later sequences, the low scenes, were filmed on location in Yokohama and relied on rapid cutting between multiple cameras. The contrast was crucial to his vision. Kurosawa even poured black dye into a river to make sure it clashed with the sterile white gleam of Gondo's mansion. All this attention to detail paid off, as High and Low became the highest-grossing Japanese film of 1963. Unfortunately, the film also wreaked havoc on Kurosawa's personal life. The filmmaker had hoped that by exposing the country's lenience toward kidnappers, it might inspire changes in the law. Instead, the number of kidnappings actually increased after the film's release. Kurosawa was blamed for it, and even terrorized by angry citizens who threatened to hold his daughter for ransom, a perverse case of reality mirroring fiction. Thankfully, no such incident took place. The threats finally subsided, and in 1964, Japan did update its laws to enact harsher penalties for kidnappers. That process might have gone as smoothly as Kurosawa had hoped, but like Mr. Gondo, he stuck by his principles and ultimately succeeded on his own terms. High and Low has evolved into one of Kurosawa's most influential films. Its DNA can be found in the procedurals of David Fincher and Steven Soderbergh, as well as the 2020 Best Picture winner, Parasite. Spike Lee's latest joint, Highest to Lowest, is a full-blown remake, with the director's own muse, Denzel Washington, stepping in for Toshiro Mifune. Lee calls his film a reinterpretation, likening his process to a jazz musician covering a great standard. Now, this distinction speaks to the reverence Lee has for the original, and it highlights how relevant the themes of class and wealth disparities still are in the present day. Kurosawa may have tailored High and Low to reflect post-war Japan, but its timeless themes prove that noir is not limited by time periods or geographical borders. If you can't wait 7 days for another noir with me, go to HBO Max for their Noirvember Crime Film Festival. High and Low is featured, along with many classic noirs such as Out of the Past and The Setup, and other lesser-known titles that I've shown on Noir Alley, like Desperate and Red Light. I'm also on hand, introducing a dozen of the films. I'll have something different for you next week here on TCM. We'll be back in Hollywood, visiting a famous stretch of Boulevard. No, I'm not talking about that movie. Instead, it's the Noir Alley premiere of The Strip, starring Mickey Rooney, Sally Forrest, and a whole bunch of great jazz musicians. It's not a musical, but it's got a lot of music. So it's sure to keep you up next Saturday night or wake you up on Sunday morning. Until then, see you in the shadows.
Next on TCM, Caged, then Ladies They Talk About, and later, one Sunday afternoon. Make a date with TCM tonight.